Welcome back to Speak Out with Christine Jurgen. I'm your host, Christine Jurgen, and today we're talking all things homeschool. And I think it's going to answer a lot of the questions you guys send me in my DMs because I get tons of how-to questions. What curriculum do I use? How do I know if I'm teaching my kid well enough? What's the actual first step that I take? I pull my kids out of school, but I don't know what to do next. So we're diving into all of that with a very seasoned homeschool mom. She's been homeschooling, I believe it's for 26 years. We have Heidi St. on today. Some of you may know her. She did run for Congress up in the Northwest, Washington State. But Heidi St. is the author of 10 books, including Becoming Mom Strong, How to Fight with All That's in You for Your Family and Your Faith, and its corresponding collection in her popular podcast, enjoyed by audiences worldwide, has been downloaded over 24 million times. She's an author, podcaster, homeschool mom. She also hosts a community of women dedicated to studying God's word in her online ministry, faiththatspeaks.com, where they apply biblical truths where faith meets culture. Heidi has been married to Jay since 1989, and they have 7 children, all of whom were homeschooled, and an ever-growing number of grandchildren. She is a wealth of knowledge for you guys to listen to. She even is teaching me things with her 27 years of experience that I don't know with my 2 years of experience. So I think you guys are going to love her, and I hope that she answers a lot of the questions you have. Heidi St. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm really excited to get to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me, Christine. It's great to see you.
So I get questions all the time about homeschooling. And a lot of times there's these people who are homeschool curious, and we know that the homeschool numbers are growing, right? It's exploding, which is phenomenal. I really do think that the best way to make America great again, if you want to call it that, is through homeschooling our children and spending that time with them and educating them well. And the public school space often fall short there. But I get questions like, how do I start? What are the concrete steps to starting? Or how do I know if I'm doing well enough? Or, so many of these questions that I thought it would just be really good for moms and dads to have a place or an episode to listen to that's just like, here's kind of the basic first steps, all of these things, and we'll go kind of dive into that through the episode, if that's makes sense.
Yeah, let's do it. I love talking about homeschooling.
So, you're more seasoned. How long have you homeschooled?
26 years.
I'm 2 years in. So hence why I have the expert on. I can answer some questions, but obviously, there might be some people listening to me like, oh my gosh, she's so naive in her homeschool journey or so new that she doesn't even know what she's talking about. So I figured I'd have you on, have an expert on, and I feel like this would be really good. So I asked my followers a lot of questions, so they could submit them as well and say, what are your most interested, what questions are you most interested in learning about? But let's kind of start off with setting the stage. Why did you as a mother choose to homeschool your children?
That's probably the most important question, because if you don't know the why, then when it gets difficult, and it does, you'll quit. And so people really need to know their why. I love this question because I never wanted to homeschool my kids. I was kind of your consummate anti-homeschooler. Everybody that I knew that was doing it was completely weird. I thought they were weird, kind of antisocial. What I would say would be your typical stereotype for homeschooling. Sure. My daughter went to a private Christian school. My first daughter, we have 7 children. Our oldest daughter now is in her mid-30s and has 5 kids of her own. So well on our way, past the really intense homeschool years. I still have a 14-year-old at home, so we're still just finishing up the tail end of homeschooling. But I had Savannah in a private school and rapidly became untenable for us, just financially, just really difficult. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so I put Savannah in a public school in a very small town in Oregon. And I'll be honest, this was the 90s, I didn't have a terrible experience with her in the public school. I loved her teacher, but what started happening was I noticed that there was a separating happening between our oldest daughter and our second born, because Savannah was getting on a school bus at 7:15 in the morning, and she wasn't coming home till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? And so I was really just kind of waiting with bated breath for my second daughter to be able to get on that school bus with her, so they'd have the shared experience of going to school. And one day, Sierra went out with her big sister to the school bus stop, and the kids started making fun of Savannah because she had her little sister with her, and why would you do that? And she's such a baby, which is really funny coming from a bunch of 7-year-old kids, right?
Totally.
But Sierra came back in the house, and she was just, she was wounded. She was embarrassed. And this mama bear in me that I did not know existed before this moment just kind of rose up, and I was like, oh, no, no, no. We are not doing that. Like, the St. John's are not doing that. You are going to love your sister. So I waited for the bus to come back around our neighborhood, and I pulled out behind it with my 3-month-old son strapped into a car seat, and Sierra, and I followed that school bus for 45 minutes through the back hills of Wilsonville, Oregon, until it got to the school. And when Sierra got out of our car, I mean, honestly, Christine, I was driving a Ford Aerostar minivan, which is a gateway drug to homeschooling. Nobody told me about this stuff. I didn't know at the time. But Sierra got out of the van and went to meet her sister at the school bus stop. And Savannah knew, like, she saw me following the bus. She was like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. And I felt like the Lord was just like, I have more for you than this. I've got more for you. And so I really was chasing something. I saw something that the homeschool movement offered that I didn't have. It was more time with my kids. It was a less rushed approach to child raising. And so at the end of that school year, I did one of the scariest things I've ever done. I mean, running for Congress has actually eclipsed that, but I would say this was the scariest thing I had done in my life to that point. And I went to her teacher, who I loved, and I said, I'm going to homeschool Savannah next year. And she said, if I had to do it over again, I would never put my kids in a public school. This was Savannah's teacher. Wow. And so I began my journey homeschooling the kids, and I wanted more time. You see, what people don't realize, we know that it's happening, but what we don't realize is that when we ship our kids off every day from 7 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 days a week, 9 months out of every year, we are literally giving somebody else the best parts of our kids, the best hours of their day, the most important time that we have to actually shape their hearts and minds. We are giving it to someone else. And often we don't know who those people are. Even in a Christian school, you don't really know. I mean, unless you're in that teacher's house, you don't know who these people are.
Right.
So I pulled Savannah out. I started homeschooling her the following year. And while I was waiting for her to finish, I started doing something with Sierra that I thought I would never do, and that was teach her to read. And I went down to a little homeschool supply store. And of course, in stereotypical fashion, the kid that owned the store, his name was Eli. Because isn't every homeschooled kid named Eli? Eli and Hannah and Jacob and all the things. And he gave me a book called Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. And as I was teaching Sierra to read, I realized I had been lied to. I had been lied to by people who told me that only credentialed teachers can teach children to read, that somehow I was inept. I graduated at the top of my class from a very private, a very sort of elite Christian school in Portland, Oregon, and I felt ill-equipped to teach a 5-year-old to read. Something is wrong with that. It's because the narrative tells us that unless we go to college and we get a degree in education, we can't teach our own children. It's a lie. Yeah. And when I realized I can teach her, and I saw an attitude shift in her, and all of a sudden I went from, I can't wait for the school bus to come and take the kids so I can have the day to myself, to what are we going to study today? What are we going to learn today? Where are we going to go today? It was a massive shift in our family. And apart from introducing our kids to the Lord Jesus, that was the best decision that we have ever made for our family. So we pulled Savannah out of school, and none of the other of our 6 kids, the remaining 6, ever have been to a traditional school. And so I think there's a big difference between what I started doing 25 years ago and what parents are doing today. When I started homeschooling, I was running to something. I was running to a system of education that I started to see as more life-giving and more affirming for families. It put parents in the driver's seat of their kids' education, and it made parents, not teachers. Parents, again, became the authority in the lives of their teachers. When we send our kids to school, we tell our kids, I relinquish my authority. That teacher is now your authority. And it has been devastating to children over the years, because as teachers have taught things that have been antithetical to what we would consider norms for family life, which is your parents are the highest authority in your life, and your parents are the ones who get to decide when you're going to learn about sexuality and how you're going to learn it. We have farmed that stuff off to other people. And when I realized that, I began to run to something that I thought would be life-giving for my family. And in fact, it was. Today's generation of homeschoolers, and I would put your listeners in this camp, they're not running to something, they're running from something. They're running from a system of education that's bankrupt morally, educationally, and spiritually. This system of education is injuring our children, literally injuring them. If they're going to run from something, we have to give them something to run to. And so I have spent the last, 15 years of my life doing just that, starting homeschool cooperatives, and now the Homeschool Resource Center out here in the Pacific Northwest. We have 1,200 kids that come every day of the week here. We offer over 230 classes so my goal is to remove every obstacle from a homeschool mom. So if she comes and says, gosh, I really want to take my kids out of the Ridgefield School District because I heard that they're letting the furries come, true story. But she says, my child really wants to do ballet and she loved the dance program. Well, great. I've got a dance teacher for you. And so we've removed every obstacle to give parents something to run to. But at the end of the day, parents need to realize, and this is scriptural, it's biblical, it's all over the Bible. Parents are the primary educators for their children. And when we forget that, and when we farm it out to people, we have given the opportunity to shape their hearts and minds, and it has generational impact. And so that was kind of why I did it. And I learned right along with my kids. And I think it was probably going to go along with a lot of the questions that we'll talk about today. But parents need to understand you can do this. You are already equipped. You don't have to have a degree in education. You just have to have love for your child. Love is a powerful motivator. Yeah. And that is why you see hundreds of thousands of homeschooling families have thrived and done well, and their kids are doing well in the real world. All of my kids are doing great. They're entrepreneurs, they're parents raising their own children now. And these were kids who I thought I was just experimenting on, with this grand experiment of homeschooling. And it turns out we were right. The education system was wrong.
No, you're so right. And that whole foundation that you just laid is exactly why I had you on. Anybody listening is, completely impressed by you completing homeschool with multiple kids, and you're still homeschooling, and, then going in and doing making co-ops and all of these other things that you're doing. And I know that you speak around the country all the time. It's interesting that you say, obviously parents can teach their kids. I kind of fell into that mindset of, I'm not going to be able to do this. And this is even probably one of the most embarrassing things I've ever said. I sent my daughter, I always kind of had it on my heart to homeschool, but I sent my daughter to kindergarten mostly because I was scared to teach her to read. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because she has since been pulled out of school and we homeschool now, but my youngest daughter, who's 5, we've been going over that exact book that you just mentioned. And I was like, wait, it's actually this easy to teach? Yep. Did she just read MOP? Did she just read SAT? Did she Yeah. I have been lied to. And first of all, kindergarten is some of the most basic stuff that you're learning. And if I went through 13 years through public school, and I'm not able to teach the most basic stuff that I learned there, then why would we be sending our kids back into that same system to begin with? Yep. So I want to jump into what you think is the best part about homeschooling. If you just had to pick one, I mean, I know there's so many. What has been the best or maybe most surprising thing about homeschooling?
The best part and the most surprising part for me was the restorative nature that homeschooling lends to families. Yes. It makes the family the unit that God intended for it to be. And our kids are very, very close. I mean, even now they're very, very close, and they have all kinds of shared experiences. When I started writing books and traveling, we did it together. We have done everything together, and the world is very good at pulling families apart. It's very good at demeaning the role of parents in the lives of their children, and actually lying to parents about the beautiful nature of family life and how precious children are. I mean, think about how antithetical to the culture homeschooling is. Homeschooling says children are a blessing. Homeschooling says parents are the primary educators for their children. Homeschooling says time is not something that we should run from. It's actually a blessing. And when you realize that the world has it backward, and God, in his wisdom, had it right all along, It's a game changer. And so for me, it was just this idea. I grew up in a broken home, and I wanted something different for our kids. And homeschooling has afforded us the time that the school takes away and the relationships. Relationships trump academics every single day of the year and twice on Sunday. If you don't believe me, go visit the University of California, Berkeley, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. We have educated fools walking around our college campuses right now who can't tell you what a woman is and don't value human life. That comes from the school system, and the family puts those values back into their children when we spend time with them, and homeschooling gives you the time that the system takes away.
Yeah, that's been one of the most beautiful things for us. I notice how close my girls are. My son, 16, he'll be 17 this month. He is in a private school, but my girls have been so beautifully close. Our whole family feels more bonded. And even my son to this day will say, like, Mom, if I didn't play football, I would want you to homeschool me next year. And he's almost 17 years old, which is crazy. And he kind of even realizes how much of a waste of time school
It's
is
awful.
and how much time is wasted.
It's a terrible waste of time. And if all throughout history, homeschooling has been the primary education model for kings, for the princes and the princesses, royalty around the world. It still is they bring private tutors in. And what we've done is we've farmed our kids out to the system of education where we really have activists disguised as teachers. They understand the power of education, and we better understand it too. Jesus, when he was talking to his disciples, said, when a student is fully trained, he'll be like his teacher. Well, is it any wonder that our kids are all messed up? They have no value they don't value human life anymore. And we don't value human life from the moment of fertilization all the way up to the oldest people in our culture. That comes from our system of education. It's why, even though I am deeply involved in politics and ran for U.S. Congress, I don't believe that politics will be the answer. Because ultimately, if we don't fix the education system in our country, we are cranking out kids by the hundreds of thousands every year who hate this country. They hate the country. They don't value life. They don't understand basic human biology. And we are graduating these kids. They're not proficient in reading, writing, and arithmetic. But boy, they can tell you there's 400 genders and tell you how you could be a narwhal whale on Friday if you want to be. But they don't have a basic understanding of the things that really matter in life. The importance of family, the importance of faith, why our freedom was hard won and why we should fight to defend it. They don't know any of these things. But when you have the opportunity to instill what you believe is important in your kids, it is game changing. And it won't just be game changing for your family. It'll be game changing for all the families around you, because you guys and your kids will impact the culture in which you live.
I agree. Yeah, it's an uncomfortable truth to realize that when you send your children to school, like you said, especially if they ride the bus and it's 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., you are not the biggest influence in your child's life, whether you want to admit it or not. You can say that you train them at home in the times that you have them, but you have these rushed mornings, you shoo them out the door, and then they come home at 4 p.m. exhausted, tired. Like you said, they have their best hours at school when they're most alert, and then they come home tired, exhausted. You're getting dinner ready. Maybe they have soccer, and then they have homework, and then they have bath, and then you get maybe 15 minutes if you're like intentional about
If you
actually
really
spending
work
that time
at
with
it.
them. Yes. And then
You have to
weekends
work for
fill
it.
up as well, with play dates or with sports or, whatever else it is, errands that you have to run. So really your kids are spending the majority of the time with their teachers. And that is who is becoming their biggest influence, not only their teachers, but also their peers, and who knows what's going on in everybody else's house. So I asked you the best part of homeschooling, and I don't think it would be fair if I didn't also ask you, what do you think is the worst part about homeschooling?
I think it definitely is. It can be exhausting for sure. And for me, the worst part, and I would say it has changed. So right now I just have one daughter left at home, and there are
That's
5
probably
years.
easy breezy compared to all the other years
It's
you've
more
been through.
difficult. It is harder for me to, and this is what I've learned, and I really hope your listeners take this to heart, just from this woman who's now in her mid 50s. Anyone can start strong. It's very hard to finish strong. And I think that's true in marriage. I think it's true in business. And I think it's true in family life. I think it's true in parenting. And it's absolutely true in homeschooling. I'm tired of teaching math. I've been doing it now for 25 years. I'm tired of teaching. There's a lot of things. I really have to work at teaching my last one. And she takes a lot of classes at the Homeschool Resource Center. And I'm so grateful because I'm there all the time anyway. But I think for parents, I think that the most difficult thing is being able to order your day in a way that homeschooling doesn't feel like it just ran you over and left you on the side of the road for dead. And so I have written books about this. I wrote a book called The Busy Homeschool Mom's Guide to Daylight, How to Fit Your size 16 day into a size 10. And the reason I did that is because I actually believe that we were created to do it this way. And the world has told us that, I know women, Christine and I'm sure you do too, who have sacrificed their families on the altar of platform.
Yeah.
We give up the most beautiful thing that God's given us, which are the people that are sitting at our kitchen table so that we can be noticed by people who will forget about us if we don't get on social media for 3 weeks straight. They won't even remember our name. But the people that are sitting at our kitchen table who are going to bless us hopefully for the rest of our lives and give us grandchildren and hopefully we can encourage them in the Lord, we sacrifice those things. It takes intentionality, and that intentionality I think is difficult because the enemy tries to tell you, oh, hey, it doesn't matter. And women get tired. And the reason that they burn out and the reason they quit is because they forget why they did it in the first place. And they let the pursuit of academics and all the other things around them take precedent. You have to choose. The feminists have lied to us, and they have said that we can have it all. And I'm here to just tell you the truth as someone who's been there and done that. You can't have it all. I think we maybe can have it all, but just not at the same time.
Yeah.
And so the years that I had little ones, I had to focus on the little ones. And that meant that I set some things aside. That meant that I didn't get to do all the things that I wanted to do. But guess what? I'm doing them now. And so I guess I want especially mothers to know the years that you give to your children are worth it. They're worth it. And you're not going to finish homeschooling as some dried up old hag. You're still going to have lots of life left in front of you. And now I've got, coming up on 8 grandchildren, at my house and all the time. I mean, it is noisy around here most of the time. And those are the best things. And so I think that's the hardest part is just keeping the focus and not letting the world distract you into things or maybe make you feel like you're somehow missing out. You're not missing out on anything. You're taking advantage of the best thing, and there will be time for other things down the road.
Yeah. So before we get into a bunch of the how-to, there's a lot of women who are really interested in homeschool, but their spouse is not necessarily on board yet or can't get there. For those women who are homeschool curious or like it's their heart's desire to be home with their children, but their husband is stuck in this mindset of you have to go to public school or private school, traditional or the school system, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You have to go this route because that's what we've always been taught. That's what we've been told. And anything else is not satisfactory. How would you encourage those women, obviously praying for their husbands, but, to talk to them and open their eyes about the beauty of homeschooling and that it actually is better?
Yeah. I mean, I was in that camp as well. And I remember going to my husband on a Saturday morning and just saying, hey, babe, what would you think if we homeschooled? And he was just like, who are you? What have you done with my wife? The homeschoolers are weird. I don't want to do that. And you don't want to do it. Look at yourself. You do not want to do that. Heidi, remember who you are. It was like this, sort of come to Jesus. And what it took for me, well, it was patience. So it was patience and prayer for sure. But I think men need to see concrete evidence that homeschooling is better. And honestly, the evidence is there. The evidence is everywhere. And so you can send them to the Homeschool Legal Defense Association where they have study after study after study that shows that the homeschool kids are literally blowing their public school counterparts out of the water. We are able to accomplish in 2.5 to 3 hours a day what it's taking the public schools 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months a year to do. And it's not working. And so statistics are on the side of homeschooling families. And I think exposing your husband, not in a judgmental, whining way, don't whine at your husband. I think Jay was really won over just by the evidence. And he finally just said, okay, well, let's give it a try let's try it a year. And that's what we did. We just said, we'll give it a year at a time. We'll just do, and after about 2 years, I mean, we wouldn't even think, and we had the opportunity to put our kids in a Christian school for free at a church that my husband was pastoring, and we turned it down because we recognized the power of time that homeschooling gives you. So I think you let your husband listen to podcasts like this one, certainly. And men, I think, men have the mantle of authority in their homes that God has given them. My husband always says that he is the chief development officer, for everyone in his family. He's seen his role to help his wife and his kids become everything that God has made them to be. Well, they want to be sure that they're putting those efforts into good places. So make a case that's compelling. And then once you get the opportunity, what you don't want to become is that whining, so when your husband comes home from work, you're just like, I'm exhausted, I can't do it. You don't want to come home to that every day. So it's a mindset, it's waiting, it's patient, and I think the results will prove themselves over time. But like I've done a million podcasts on this. I've written books on it. They can go to the National Home Education Research Institute, which is run by Brian Ray. That is a fantastic place for research and statistics. Once you see the statistics and you see what's happening in the public schools, it's impossible to deny that homeschooling is a better choice.
Totally. I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. So for the women who have their husbands on board, a lot of people are like, I plan on pulling my child at the end of this school year, or I'm pulling them right now, but I don't even know what I'm doing. What are the concrete, very first steps to do, whether you've just pulled them or you plan to pull them shortly?
I think the first step is you realize that you don't have to have a first step, right? The first step is pulling them. Get your kids out of public school. I cannot say it strongly enough. The Titanic is sinking. The barn is on fire. At what point are you going to get the horses out? Nobody ever sees a barn on fire and goes, gosh, I just don't, once I get the horses out, where am I going to put? No, you just get them out. Just get them out. You don't have to have a plan for it right now. The main thing is to bring your children home so that they don't have to swim through a cesspool every day to get a mediocre education. So that's the first thing. You don't have to have a plan. The second one is I always tell people, look and see what the homeschool requirements are in your state. They vary from state to state. Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states, but every state has a little bit different approach to it. Here in Washington state, we are required to file what's called a letter of intent. So if your child is a compulsory age, most states it's 7 years of age or older. If you're pulling a 5-year-old out of school, you don't have to do anything in almost every state in the nation. So find out what the law is for your state. Again, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, hslda.org, is I think the very best place to go for that. You can search for that by state. And then I would say find other homeschool groups in your area. Notice I have not said a single time, come up with a math curriculum. These are not the first things. You need the building blocks of community, establish your family. It takes time to do detox again. Most of the parents that I talk to that pull their kids out of school, it takes them a few weeks just to reorient themselves to family life again. Sometimes we got to work on heart issues. We got to work on attitude stuff. We got to spend time together again as a family and come up with that plan together. And so once you've done that, you start with the basics: reading, writing, and arithmetic. You don't need to worry about, geography and all the other things. Just start with the basics. And I like to do easy. I'm a sucker for an easy curriculum. So I looked for grammar programs that literally had the word easy in them. Easy Grammar is still my favorite grammar program. On the history, like my 14-year-old is finishing an easy grammar assignment as we are doing this interview. So I would go down, talk to other homeschool parents and see what do they really like. And you can determine what your own learning style is. Research the learning styles. Cynthia Tobias has a great book out called The Way They Learn. And I think it is still the gold standard. You can do online learning style assessments. Find out, are you a visual learner? Are you more auditory? Do you like to see things? Like I am a visual learner. If my kids read a story problem to me, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. I have to see it. Right? Once you understand how you process information as the parent, you'll understand how you're going to be a better teacher. Yeah. So just start there and then start with the basics and then work your way out from there. And as you're doing it, you're implementing family life. It shouldn't take you more than about, depending on the age of your kids, more than about 2.5 hours a day to homeschool your kids. It doesn't have to be a 9 a.m. to 4 o'clock in the afternoon event in your house 5 days a week. We only homeschooled 4 days. We never did a 5-day school week in our home. And I homeschooled my kids from about 8:30 in the morning to 12 because there were 7 of them. But they knew in the afternoon, I had a book I was working on, things I had to do. I was trying to get, supper going and start the laundry and all those things. So you want to come up with a plan that works for you. Again, that the Busy Homeschool Mom's Guide to Daylight has a ton of schedules that I got from ordinary homeschool moms that work outside the home, moms that teach piano lessons, and moms that had lots of kids, moms that had one kid. And I took their schedules and put them in the book so people could kind of see, oh, this is what it looks like, in this kind of a family. I needed that desperately when I started homeschooling and it didn't exist.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, it's really important. And then you'll find your way. But I think if I could go back 20 years ago, Christine, and tell myself anything, is what I would have shook myself really hard and said, chill the heck out, chill out. I was so nervous about impressing my parents who thought I was crazy, and Jay's parents who weren't really sure about it either. And, what my next door neighbor, the public school teacher, was going to think. I wouldn't give, because the fruit will develop over time. It takes time to see fruit in the lives of your kids, and it will be there. And I would have told myself, chill out, read to your kids. The best thing you can do, find great literature, get a list of living books off of the internet and read to your kids, missionary stories, YWAM missionary stories, read them biographies, read them the history, George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington. Oh, for goodness sake, we've read all these books to our kids. You know what it does? It gives you time together as a family, and it gives them the real living history of the country at the same time. Read to your kids. If you didn't do anything for the first 4 or 5 months, find some great books and spend a couple hours on the couch every day reading out loud to your kids. It's game changing. It really is.
Yeah, I would reiterate that because that was something that I was I was nervous about, of like, how am I going to teach them? I don't know what curriculum to choose. Even if you choose a specific curriculum, I'm a sucker for easy as well. Like if it's not open and go and I have to spend an hour pre-planning and doing all that stuff, I know that I'm not going to do it. So I need an open and go curriculum where basically we sit down and we're talking about it. This is what we're doing today, and then we just do it. And some of the stuff I'm relearning that I didn't learn when I was in school, or I forgot when I was in school. It's funny because some of the things that I say, my husband's background's like, you'll never use that in your life. I'm like, but it's kind of true depending on what we're talking about. However, you can also create your own curriculum. It doesn't have to be all from one place. If you like this math or this science, or you try something in the beginning and you don't like it, you can change the next year. I think it feels like such a daunting thing.
You can change it midstream. I mean, if you're doing something, and give it the old college try, right? Give it at least 3 months. But if you're just like, dude, it doesn't resonate with my kids, shelve it. Try something different. I agree with you. I am absolutely an a la carte homeschool mom. I don't have a single curriculum that I have just used one company for. So right now my daughter is using teaching textbooks for algebra this year. I love teaching textbooks because it basically does the work for you. And then it sends me a report so I can tell exactly what problems she's missing. And then I can go back to those problems that she missed, click a little play button, and it explains what the problem was about and why she missed it. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. I love history. I love U.S. history. And so I've taught that, mostly myself. I loved Sunlight. I did U.S. history through Sunlight. Knotgrass has a great U.S. history program.
That's what we use is Knotgrass.
Yeah, I love Knotgrass. There's so many really great ones out there. This is another really good reason why people should go to homeschool conferences. You can pick up the curriculum, take a look at it. There's no substitute for in-person at a homeschool conference. I know you guys can get a bunch of stuff on YouTube and you listen to great podcasts like this one, but there's something really amazing about meeting the vendors, picking the curriculum up, thumbing through it. If it doesn't resonate with you, right immediately put it down and move on, right? Yeah. I am such a visual learner. You give me a giant teacher's manual, I'm out.
Right. I know. If all I see is only words and it's
I can't do it. No,
thank you.
No, thank you. And I think a lot of moms are like that. My daughter Savannah is using the good and the beautiful with her kids, and she loves it. And that's that's an open and go curriculum. And she's busy like I am. She needs that. And so you will change over time. You're probably not going to finish with the curriculum that you start with. You're going to see different things. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. You can change it. You can do things that resonate with you. If you're learning, we read, Red Sails to Capri. And so we're studying the Greek islands and all of the, the beautiful scenery. Then we might augment it with some YouTube videos. Or we read a story about a little snapping turtle called Men of the Mississippi. Clancy C. Clancy has some really great books. The guy's an evolutionist, wasn't a Christian, but the truth, so you can augment that with your kids. But really beautiful stories that share the history of the country. And this one was about this Men of the Mississippi was a snapping turtle that got stuck in the Mississippi River, and he ends up in the lock and dam system. Well, he gets stuck in these turbines, and my kids are like, what? Why? So we just got in the car And we drove, 45 minutes east up the Columbia River to the Bonneville Dam. There was nobody there that day. And the ranger was like, heck yeah, let's go through the dam. Took all of my kids into this, right into the depths of the dam. And we got to see how the turbines work. And all of a sudden, my 12-year was like, oh, that's why men got stuck. Yes, that's why men got stuck. But it's just little things like that. And they still remember. They remember those things. And like I said at the beginning, homeschooling gives you the time to do that. And your kids are worth it. I wonder when we're going to start going, our kids are worth it. We live in such an adult-centered society. We create babies in the womb for adults. Nobody did that for the kid. They did that for the adult. We send our kids to public schools so the adults can have the day off. Everything we do is centered around adults. I wonder what would happen if parents, not in a worshipful way, but if we started thinking, okay, we have X number of years to influence these kids. Let's not waste them. And that became more important than pursuing the raise at work or pursuing whatever it is we wanted. That became the more important thing. It's life-changing.
Amen. No, I agree completely with that. So I have my personal opinion on this, like when you should start. And there are studies that, say one thing over the other. But there's a lot of people who I see who are like, I have a 2-year-old or I have a 3-year-old, I want to get started homeschooling. What do you suggest? When do you suggest that people should actually start homeschooling and doing like formal work?
Yeah, not at 2. That's for sure. I always tell people, like, you're going to have lots of time to crack open a book. So when a mom comes to me, this happens a lot because I sit on panels, and I take questions like this all the time. And this mom was like, I'm so nervous. I've got to, my child's not learning how to read, and I'm thinking I might need to go see a therapist. And she goes through all this agony. She's crying herself to sleep because this kid's not reading. I'm like, how old is your child? And he's 4. I was like, okay, stop. Here's what you do. You take your 4-year-old or your 3-year-old, 2-year-old, or your 5-year-old, and you open the door to your back patio, to your backyard, and you tell them, go outside and push over the heaviest thing that you can find in the yard. And whatever crawls out from underneath it, we're going to Google it, and you're done.
Yeah.
Your job when your kids are little is to instill a sense of wonder in them about the world around them. Bake cookies with your kids, for goodness sake. This rush to academics is because we've made education an idol in this country. That's the only reason. The founding fathers, the people that wrote the Federalist Papers, some of the most brilliant men on the face of the earth were homeschooled. And I guarantee you their mothers weren't cracking a book with them at 3 years old. They were out chopping wood. They were learning a work ethic. They were being amazed by what they saw floating down the river and how they could catch it. Right. And we've flipped the narrative on its head because of the university model. And we've tried to make the university model work at home, and it just doesn't work at home. Kids weren't meant to learn that way. Let them grow up. Let them have time. Yeah. I have a friend, and I realize not everyone can do this, but I met this woman years ago. She had like 11 kids. I revere this woman, like 7 kids, and I was out. My body was like, ding, 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 you are done. But I asked her, because this is what we always do. I'm like, what did you do? What did you do for homeschooling? And she said, we didn't do any formal curriculum until my kids were in high school.
Wow.
High school. And I said, what did you use? Because now I'm like, ding, 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 weirdo alert, And she said, they used the Bible. She said, we used the Bible. We learned all about the world. We learned all about history through reading the Bible. I had my kids copy sections of the Bible. That's how they learned good writing habits. They learned semicolons from writing them in the Bible. And their mom saying, oh, semicolon does this. You can see, here's a preposition. They dissected passages from the Bible. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I said, well, what are your kids doing now? 2 of them are doctors. 1 of them's an attorney. 3 of them are teachers. These kids are geniuses.
Wow.
In their own right. And she just, I don't know that I would do it that way just because I just like other things to study. But my point is, she knew her own kids and her kids are flourishing. So what worked for Heidi St. John might not work for Christine Jurgen, right? But we know that God's going to give us the wisdom and the ability. And if there were no this is so important. If there were no homeschool conferences, if there was not access to curriculum, if the U.S. government, which we saw under Biden, how bad things can get, we saw the jumping off place for religious persecution. We saw it.
Totally.
If there was a time that the U.S. government said you can't homeschool your kids, curriculum is outlawed, we're going to make your kids have to go to school, and parents decided to keep their kids home, If all you had access to was the Word of God and the power of the Holy Spirit, it would be enough. It would be enough.
Yeah.
God has given you
Interesting.
everything you need. And I think we need to stop living in fear and just ask the Lord, show me. And He will.
Yeah.
He's good like that.
It's interesting that you bring that up because a lot of times there's another homeschool mom who was homeschooled and is a homeschool mom now, and she talks about how I think she was like 12 when she learned to read, and it's something so funny because you mentioned that and like they didn't start formal curriculum till high school.
Yep.
Nobody really asks you how old were you when you learned XYZ. They just
Nope.
care that you learned it. It's like, you know how to read. Nobody says, were you 4 when you learned how to read or were you 7 when you learned how to read? It doesn't matter. And I think being comfortable and confident in that, because we are set up in this rat race and where we, are constantly comparing ourselves to other people. And it's like, well, my kid is doing this at this age and my kid is doing this at this age. And we have to really let that go. And we all
Yes.
fall victim to it at some point in time, I think. But I was teaching my daughter how to read, and we're not all the way through the 100 easy lessons. It got to a point where she was getting really, really frustrated with it. And
Yeah.
so I was like, you know what? We're just going to set this down
We're
and we're
ready
going
for
to pick it
book
back
now.
up in a few months. Like we
Yeah.
don't even have to do this right now. You're 5
Yes.
years old. I can pick this back up when you're 6 years old. And so I think being able to rid yourself of that weight of comparison to other people and what other kids might be doing. Not every kid is going to want to read
Right.
that early or be interested in the same way that others. Now, if somebody's showing an interest, sure, like you can go ahead and explore it if you'd like, but also kids should still be kids, especially at 2, 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
years old.
Let them be little.
Climbing trees.
Yeah, let your kids be little. I mean, if you, my friend Jenny and I have this conversation a lot. She's been at the Homeschool Resource Center, and she has an awesome Instagram called 1,000 Hours Outside. She has
Oh,
amazing
yes.
things.
Yes. Love
Yeah,
Jenny.
so I know Jenny. I've known her for a long time. Josh and Jenny have been at our house. You know what we do when they come over here? We just goof around. We
Yeah.
go hiking. We're outside. It's amazing what happens when you just let your kids be bored, for goodness sake. Let them be bored. We've got so many Pinterest moms out there. Pinterest broke the mom generation, right? Because on the heels of Pinterest came Instagram, and all the moms have their homeschool moms are doing it. They're putting their A reels up on Instagram for everyone to see. I like to see the dirty laundry and the messy kitchen and the messy schoolroom. That's real. And when your kids are bored and they come to you and say, I'm bored, I just go, oh, well, I got a bathroom to clean. If you guys need something to do, I got laundry, I got bathrooms for days. And you know what they do? They run and they find something else to do.
Totally.
Yeah. And I
And
just,
you don't even have to have, speaking of the Instagram moms, you don't even have to have a homeschool room. We have a dining room
No.
table.
Yeah, that was us too.
You don't have to have, I think there is this like, it's kind of like the trad wife movement where everything becomes so picturesque and you want it to
Right.
look so perfect and curated. It doesn't have to. I tell you, my dining room table looks like a sloppy mess when we get everything out and we're doing our homeschool. And like, we wouldn't learn any better if we were in a room versus
Right.
at the dining room table. So if you
Right.
don't have a specific room, obviously you need a place to store it, but we have these little rolling carts and then
Yep.
we pull them
Yep.
out and then we put them back. And
Yep.
it doesn't have to look like Pinterest.
It really doesn't. And I think often the best homeschool experiences are not the ones that look like Pinterest. Because you fold homeschooling into your everyday life. I am a bit of a type A personality in that I have so many things going. I mean, while I was homeschooling my kids, eventually I ended up writing books and traveling and speaking. And so that life was not conducive to me not having a plan. And so I tended to be, I made a schedule, I put it up on the wall. But when I was teaching about the schedule one year, I told everybody my husband called the schedule the master. So he'd come home from work and be like, is there any room for me in the master tonight? And I'd be like, yes, Thursday at 9:00. There you are. I penciled you in. Let me know if you need some attention before then. But right now I got you penciled in for Thursday. And we realized, I've become kind of a slave to the schedule. And that was a good teaching moment for me because I had to kind of back up and try something different and let that go a little bit. The most amazing teaching that ever happened in our house didn't come out of a textbook. It just didn't. It was places that we went. It was watching the news and talking about what was going on with our children. It was taking them everywhere with me. It was helping them. It was my kids helping me plan the meals for the week and then shopping for them. And bam, you know what they're doing? They're budgeting. I mean, those kids had home economics, down by the time they were 9 years old because I was having them plan meals with me. It's life. And I think we take it and we compartmentalize it, and we don't need to do that necessarily. Homeschooling to me is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And once you see it as a lifestyle, instead of, well, we homeschool from 9 to 12 every day or whatever, once you see it more as a lifestyle, it becomes a lot more freeing, and it invites freedom for your kids too.
For sure, for sure. So I have like several more questions, and so maybe we can go through them a little bit quicker on these, just so because I want to get to them and be able to steer people toward this podcast. And obviously they can go listen to yours. I'm sure you dive into all sorts of things. I know you do, and not even just homeschool related. But okay, homeschooling with toddlers or babies around. How do you keep the babies and toddlers distracted? That can be a little bit difficult. You feel like you're neglecting one because you're focusing on the other. What's an easy tip there?
Yeah, I think if you've got older kids in the house and you can assign an older child to a younger child, I did that for many, many years. And when I didn't have older kids, when I just had, maybe I had two that I was trying to teach, and then I had a whole bunch of little ones, sometimes I would wait for nap time. When it was nap time or quiet time, I would focus on teaching math or reading lessons when the little ones were down for a nap. Sometimes I resorted to Veggie Tales, all right? Sometimes my kids were sitting in front of Veggie Tales. We all still know the pirate who can't do anything. Everyone can still sing it. Why? Because we watched 7,000 episodes of the pirate who can't do anything on Veggie Tales. So I think you do what you have to do. Don't overthink it. If you're overwhelmed, if you see your little ones need help, if you've got a child who's learning to read, maybe let him tutor a younger one who's learning to read. There's a lot of different ways that you can. We did a buddy system in our house. Do a buddy system, but do what works for you. And if you just go, dude, this is too much chaos, wait till they take a nap, and then do those few little subjects that you need really to focus in on when your little ones are down for a nap. The other thing that you can try doing, and I did this for many years, is we had what we called a school box for the little kids. And it had, really beautiful coloring books in it and crafts and toys that they could only play with while mama was teaching school with the older kids. And they waited for that box to come out. So it went, way up high so they couldn't get it. It was this very special box. And we would pull it out, and they would sit down and they would have special things inside of that box that they could play with that I knew would keep them busy for about 45 minutes. So lots of different ways that people can come up with ways to distract your kids.
So, and obviously you can utilize weekends as well if you need to.
Oh,
You
for
know
sure.
what I
You can
mean?
do whatever you want. Yes.
Nighttime, weekends, all of that. I feel like people forget, like they can do things outside of the box. We don't have to look exactly like school.
That's right.
So when kids are old enough for the more formal schoolwork, talk to me about what an average homeschooler like day looks like. Kind of what does and I know you said in your book you have different things, but give me just like a typical day in the life of Heidi St. John homeschooling.
Yeah, I mean, well, now I'll have to go back a few years because my life is not typical anymore. But when I had all the kids at home, I was pretty good about getting everybody up in the morning, and I love to read to our kids. So usually first thing in the morning, for years we did breakfast together in the morning, and so while the kids would sit, they might sit at the breakfast bar and be reading to me while I'd be making some hot sausage hash or something for the kids. And then right after that, we tended to sit on the couch and we would read. I really think there's only a couple of subjects that are individual. Math is pretty individual. But we did science together. We did history together. We did Bible reading together. And so, I had lots of different ages, and I teach on this. In fact, there's probably at my website, maybe I think a talk called multi-level teaching, because I think that's kind of a skill that you learn over time. But I think you teach to the oldest child. So I might be reading out of an apology. I love their Young Explorer series. And so we read through those, and I read with my little ones. And when the little ones looked bored, I would just Google, like a coloring sheet of the planet Saturn, and I would print it off, and I'd go, here you guys go, you color this, and Mama's going to keep reading. And then they're quiet again. Now they're reading, and we're going to continue reading about the solar system or wherever it was. So I let my kids off the bus, depending on, whatever the bus meaning the thing we're learning, at an age appropriate time. And you'll kind of get a feel for that as you go along. Bring your kids in. You'll be amazed at what the little ones will absorb while you're focused on teaching to the oldest children.
Yeah, you're not lying. My 5-year-old, my 8-year-old's learning her times tables, and my 5-year-old goes around reciting times tables. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you even know what you're saying?
Girl, have you found times tables the fun way yet?
Do what?
Have you found times tables the fun way yet?
We do it by song.
Yeah.
There's like songs. So we use The Good and the Beautiful for our math
Hmm.
curriculum and for our language arts curriculum, and we absolutely love it. Very open go.
Yep.
And maybe we'll change one day, but right now it's working for us,
Yeah.
and
That's my
it's
daughter too.
fantastic.
She's using. Yeah.
But there's songs that go with it, and so you just listen to the songs. And my daughter, sometimes my 8-year-old is like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to listen to the song," and she's like, "I can't get it." After one time, and then I notice she's like humming it in her head and singing it, and now she just writes her times tables out. I mean, I'm even having to sit there think like, wait, what's 9 times this, or what's, whatever. And she's got it like this, before I've even figured it out.
So
But my
great.
5-year-old is also reciting it now too, because she just listens to Big Sister singing that. And so when we get to times tables, I might not even have to teach her times tables because she's just heard it from Big Sis singing it all the
Oh yeah.
time.
Yeah, and I bet you're going to see that pans out. There is a curriculum, and I want to say it's City Creek Press that publishes it, but I'm not sure anymore. But it is literally called Times Tables the Fun Way, and
Oh,
it is
that's cool.
stories that go, so like like 6 times 6 is 36. The
Yep.
story is two thirsty sixes, right? So it sounds like 36, but you can see these like parched 30, this pair of sixes, and they're trudging up a mountain and they're trying to get, but it's 6 times 6 is 36. Six is a pair of thirsty sixes. So there's all these like, they're coloring pages and flashcards that go with it. And I taught all of my kids, and actually even a whole bunch of homeschool co-op classes, using times tables the fun way. And it made math fun again. I was like, dude, I used to hate math. And now we're like, having fun with it again. I think that's another really good benefit. You find what works for you, and
Hmm.
if it works, we'll do it over and over and over again. I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear how when you look back in a couple of years and the things that are sticking with your kids. I think it'll surprise you. It's
I think
exciting.
so too. So is it possible to homeschool and work at the same time? There's a lot of people who say, I can't do it, I work, or I want to do it by work. How can I make it work? Is it possible?
It's absolutely possible. I'm pretty well known for being a working homeschool mom. I've written books. When he was working as a pastor full time, I worked nights at the hospital. So I was working nights at the hospital. I sold Tupperware for several years. I did all kinds of things to sort of augment our income. And this is the thing, Christine, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but I actually don't think it's true. When people come to me and say, "Oh, I just can't do that,"
I
most
agree.
of the time, I mean, I do think it's true sometimes, but I think that it's the exception and not the rule. I think most people are like, well, I want that really nice house in the suburb, and I really want to be able to make that car payment for that second really nice car. Our family went without a lot of those things for many, many years. We drove, beater cars, didn't live in the best neighborhood in town. We were focusing on what we could do with my husband's income and my little augmenting on the side. And that meant that our kids all wore hand-me-down clothes. It meant, and you know what's crazy about that, Christine, is none of our kids remember that we were broke. They don't remember that stuff. And I made a lot of soup. And so when people tell me, "Oh, I can't do it," most of the time I'm like, where there's a will, there's a way. When we want something and you see the benefit in it, it's amazing what you'll sacrifice to get that thing. But I think oftentimes it's the selfishness and the desire to not, we like the comfort of the dual income. People say, "Well, we live in a society where you absolutely can't have a single." No, you can. It's just harder now than it used to
Yeah.
be. And we
You
can,
just might be in a different neighborhood.
oh, come on. And yes, and we can, this is not what this is about, but we can lay the blame for this squarely at the feet of the feminist movement. And they lied to women. And now it looks like, instead of just being wives and mothers, now we all have full-time job. Being a wife and a mom is a full-time job. Homeschooling is a full-time job. Now we're going to work on top of all these things. And we've done this in large part to ourselves. And so when people say, "Oh, I can't do it," I just don't believe you. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but I generally don't believe you. There are circumstances where you can't do it, but I think if you really want to do it, you will figure it out.
Yeah.
And it is figure outable. It's figure outable. And to me, it was worth the sacrifice that we made. It was worth the financial sacrifice, and it was a sacrifice. There were several years that I did WIC. I mean, for goodness sake, I did WIC for years and years and years and years and years. I mean, I couldn't wait for the peanut butter and the eggs and all that stuff. But you know what? The trade-off was I had my kids home with me. and somebody else wasn't raising them, and somebody else wasn't, imparting their values to my children. My husband and I imparted our values to our children, and that was worth all the macaroni and cheese that we ate, and all the taco soup that we made, and all the hand-me-down clothes that my kids wore. It was worth it. And so we're always trading something. It's just deciding what is worth it and how are we going to pursue the thing that we want. And you watch, the Lord will provide. He will. He really will.
So when it comes to homeschooling, how much does homeschooling typically cost?
Not that much. I would say, for goodness sake, Washington State gives $17,000 a year to students in the public school system. You give $17,000 a year to a homeschool mom, she's going to take her kids to Paris several times, right? Really, you can get, and I did this for years, you can get your curriculum off of eBay if you need to. A math book's going to set you back, $50. If you get the whole enchilada, you can get your curriculum at Walmart. You can walk into Walmart. They've got math books. Do not get their history. I looked at it. It's rotten. But they have math books and basic language books. You can get them at Costco, for goodness sake. What are you looking at? $12.97 for a book. There are homeschool fairs and homeschool bookstores. We do this at Firmly Planted at the Homeschool Resource Center. We have a huge bookstore there. A lot of it's consignment. It shouldn't cost you more than, I would say, $300 a student. If you're watching what you're doing and you're paying, because a lot of your kids are going to share. If you invest, like let's say you invest in a really good like an all-inclusive history, like you got Sunlight in all the books, and that costs you $500 for that year, or $600, I think. That's for, 4 students for a year. And so this idea that it has to be it can be really expensive. It can be as expensive as you want it to be, but it doesn't need to be. And there are lots of really simple ways to teach children. Teach your child to read. What's that book set you back, Christine?
Oh gosh, 29.
I was going to say 20.
29?
I was going to say $20, between $20 and $25. Or if you're like me and you got it on eBay, it costs you $7.99. So my copy of Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons has been used for six children. I love that book. It is worn absolutely thin. I have taped it in lots of different places because my kids wrote their names on it as they were learning through it. So it's like a history book of the St. John family now. But that one book that I probably paid $15 for has been spread over 6 kids over 20 years. And so
there's also resources. You mentioned eBay, but you can do Facebook Marketplace. You can also
100%.
trade with other homeschool families.
Yes.
This is how crazy I am. Facebook Marketplace has become my favorite pastime. I just love looking on there for stuff.
It's an obsession.
When I'm traveling, I even change my location to see ooh, what does this area have on Facebook Marketplace? And so you can find different resources like that. There are some, I know The Good and the Beautiful has free curriculum that you can download. It's why they can't go even cheaper on their curriculum for those who buy it, because they do offer it for free to some people. I choose to buy it because we can, and I know that helps them offer free curriculum to other people, but also I don't want to sit there and print it out or do
That's
it on
how
the
I was.
computer.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of my personal preference. But there are ways that you could even do it, I would argue, for free and come up with your own curriculum.
Oh, for sure.
The
Amazon
internet
online
is there.
comes to mind. Yeah, so many things online. I don't know if
Libraries.
it's still there. Oh, I hate the library now. My library is so woke and stupid. I won't even go in them anymore. It makes me so angry because you walk into my library and you see the gay BCs right there in front of the kid. I'm like, really, you guys? Whatever. But if you are looking online, you can find enchantedlearning.com. It was $20 a year for an enchantedlearning.com membership. And I downloaded all kinds of little printable booklets for my kids. If we were I would just type in, whatever it was we were learning, trebuchet. And a picture of a trebuchet would come up and little parts of it would come up and we could cut them out and paste them and, all the things. It was $20 a year. Yeah. So, moms, once you figure it out, talk to other homeschool moms. There are lots of Facebook groups too, like thrifty homeschool moms, where they're figuring out how to do this. Once you kind of figure it out and you get into I think the biggest investment is for the first child. If you've got multiple children, you just, spread that out over time. Mm-hmm. A lot of my stuff I've handed down to my kids now and they're using it with their kids.
That's awesome.
So, it's wonderful.
And it can be done slowly. I think that's the biggest thing, like you mentioned earlier. Okay, so real quick, how do we know if our kids are on track? How do we know if we're doing enough? I know that's something that people are concerned about, are they on par with public schools, which they're usually ahead, but how do we know if we're giving our kids enough?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important too that this whole idea of doing enough and having them be on par is very subjective. And a really good example, I could only think of my own child right now, my 14-year-old daughter. In Washington State, we're required to test our kids every year. So they do like the Cat 5 or the Iowa test or whatever. We'll test our kids. And then I get those test scores back. The state of Washington doesn't do anything, but it kind of lets me know how she's doing overall. Some kids do not test well. So that even though they might be really smart, they're not going to test very well. And those standardized tests won't be a good reflection. Sailor, and this is partly probably because of me, Sailor loves to read and she loves to write. So at 14 years old, she is testing out for the last year in college. So she tests out college level for reading and writing, but she's behind. So she's a freshman. This last year she tested 7th grade for math. So she tested 2 years behind in math. I didn't panic. I just was like, all right, we've missed a couple of things. Let's go back. So right now she's doing teaching textbooks 8. And we just started back until I realized that those foundational pieces were there. And guess what? Because I'm not panicking, she's not panicking. So she might be like college level in reading and reading comprehension and writing, but she's struggling in her math. That's fine. So we'll bolster the math a little bit, and I won't push as hard for, if my easy grammar is producing a kid who can really do great in grammar. And so I know I can take my foot off the gas a little bit. So I think the testing, in states that require it, great. And for parents who really want to know, how does my kid do in a standardized test? I think those are good metrics, but I don't think that they tell the whole story. And so you really want to find out, how does my child learn? If your child is struggling, find out, are they a visual learner, an auditory learner? You try to teach a child who is naturally drawn to images and pictures. You try to teach them or read to them, they're going to be frustrated. That's the child that needs to read. They need to see it. And so I think part of it is just, and then don't worry if there are going to be gaps in your kid's education. I'm just going to clear the slate. There will be gaps in your kid's education. There were gaps.
I was public school, and there are gaps in my education. Okay?
Yeah, and I went to a private school, and there were gaps in my education. When I went away to college, there were things I was like, well, shoot, I guess I should have paid better attention. But guess what? You're going to catch up. Your kids are going to catch up. I say we stop bowing down to the idol of education. It is an idol in this country, and we do what we know is best for our kids. And this is really important. If you guys don't hear anything else I say today, hear this. What the Lord starts with you in the lives of your children. So what God begins through you and your children, He will finish. God will finish it. And so we throw everything we have at it, we do the best that we can, and then we trust that if there are gaps, and there will be, the Lord will finish it. He will help your child finish it. None of my kids are going, there are gaps in my kids in my education. They're not doing that. They're going out, and when they realize they're deficient somewhere, they're figuring it out. And your kids will do the same thing.
Yeah.
So everyone needs to
what a time to have gaps in your education. It's 2025. We all have little computers at our fingertips where if we just don't know something, you figure it out. I don't think it's like that big of a deal to not know something. So if there's something that your kids are really good at that is unique to them, like how do you kind of spot what your kids are gifted in or maybe not gifted in? Do you have any tips there?
That is a super great question. I think that is the primary job that parents have, is to really find out what their kids are gifting is, what their passion is, and then give them opportunities to develop that passion, because every one of our kids is different. Our daughter Sierra, if anybody goes to my website, it was my daughter Sierra, who's 30 years old and has a little guy of her own now. She designed that. She does all of the graphic design for the Bible studies I've written, the book covers, all that kind of stuff has been done by my daughter. When she was 7 years old, there was a snowstorm at our house. It was like, I don't know, February or something. And I noticed that we had not taken the Christmas lights off of our house yet. And so a lot of them in the snow had come down and they'd fallen into the snow. And I asked the kids to go help me clean it up. Well, I look over at her and she's got a little disposable camera. I mean, this was a long time ago. Okay, so no hate. She has this little disposable camera, and she's eye level she's down in the snow, eye level with this Christmas bulb. And she's taking pictures. I never would have seen it that way. But I went and had that film developed at Costco, and the pictures were stunning. It was just, she saw something that nobody else saw. She took pictures of them, and I was like, this girl has an eye. an artistic eye. And so we actually paid for her to take some online graphic design classes when she was still like 12 years old, 13. By the time she was 16, she was doing her own thing. She did her own graduation announcements, and she's a full-time graphic designer. She works part-time for me, and then she freelances part-time. So same thing with our son. I noticed that he loved Legos. My son was a kinesthetic learner like a lot of your sons are. When I was reading out loud, he was super bored until my friend said, let him build. And I was like, if I give him Legos, he'll be distracted. No, he needed the movement. Guess what he does today? He's in construction. He's a builder. He just finished, my son spent the last year and a half designing and building the brand new podcast studio that I podcast from.
Incredible.
And so, and it's world class because he loves that stuff. And so so I'm looking to see what do they gravitate toward, and then give your kids opportunity to mine those gifts and abilities out and try them in the marketplace. When I was a kid, I went to, I was in a regular school, the back of my report cards. This is so funny, Christine. Like my mom gave them to me one year, and all my report cards. I was a good student because I like learning. But the back, Heidi's a great student, but she talks too much. Heidi's a great kid, loved having her in class. She did pretty good, with her school this year, but I had to separate her from Sharon 15 times because they just would not stop talking. No one ever said to me, I wonder if you might be a teacher. I wonder if you might be a speaker. That's what I ended up gravitating toward, is communicating and writing books and doing the things I love to do. But it was in me when I was 5 years old. Yeah. And I wonder what would happen if parents really look to see that thing that's annoying you might be the thing that your child is going to be doing when they're an adult. It's
interesting that you say that your teachers were saying that you talk too much, because we're told, the kids who are homeschooled are not going to be socialized. Well, you're not allowed to talk in school. What are you talking about? My kid gets in trouble all the time for talking in school. Like literally, he's a social butterfly. And I would get calls from the teacher. He's really great in class. Same thing. But he talks too much. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I tell him not to talk in class. I'm trying. And then we're told that's how you socialize, is you go to public school, which is obviously not the case. Heidi, you are such a wealth of knowledge. And I want to reiterate everything that you said, but especially as it comes to the blessing that homeschool is to families as a family unit, because it really is so beautiful. I took my daughters to Nashville on a mom-daughter trip. We were going for an event, and I was like, let's just turn this into a homeschool trip. And we went to Andrew Jackson's house and James Polk's house, both former presidents. And
you went to the Hermitage.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we've taken our kids there, yeah.
Did a bunch of different things in Nashville, which I love, great city. And I asked my daughter, my 8-year-old, because I say I homeschool both of them. The 5-year-old, I kind of just let her do her thing. I don't really, we haven't started super formal stuff yet. And I asked her, actually I asked both of them, what was your favorite part about the trip? And they were like, spending time with you. Yep. And I was like, no. Okay. Of the activities we did, what was your favorite part about the trip? And they were like, being with you, Mom. Yeah. And that was like such an it's going to make me tear up. Like such an eye-opening thing of it really doesn't matter what you're doing. Your kids still crave that time with you, and they need it, even at 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. But it's just such a bonding experience for all of us and for my girls as sisters. And I think you touched on that so much in this podcast and gave tons of resources. And I want everybody to check out your website and your books and all of the things. If you could give one piece of advice to those who are teetering on this line and they're scared to make the leap, last question, what would that piece of advice be?
I think you just said it. I mean, you're making me tear up listening to you, because you just heard your girls say it was with you. Christine, you are irreplaceable in the lives of your kids. And every person listening to this needs to know that you are irreplaceable. There's no teacher that can replace you. There's no activity that can replace you, and you will never get this time with your kids again. Take it from me. My kids are grown and gone now. And I'm telling you, I miss it. I miss it, but I don't look back over those years and wish that I had done something different, because I know that I wrung every minute out of it that I possibly could. You are irreplaceable. And God was the one who decided to give those beautiful kids to you. And I think that's the most important thing for people to hear. You're living it. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, Christine, was several years ago, you called me and said, I'm thinking about homeschooling. Mm-hmm. And I was like, girl, yes, go, let's go. Yeah. And you're seeing the benefit. The benefit is not, yes, it's academic, but the benefit is relational and spiritual first and foremost. It's the hardest, best thing you'll ever do with your kids, and you will not regret it.
Yeah. I was not planning on crying on this episode. Heidi, thank you so much for joining. Gosh, I just love you so much. And again, if I could fit every single question in, I totally would have, but we're obviously gone over time a little bit already. But Heidi has a wealth of knowledge on all her stuff. Where can they find you? What is your website? Where are you on social media?
I'm everywhere on social media, just under my name, just Heidi St. John. I'm on Instagram at Heidi St. John. On my website, HeidiSt.John.com. I've written, I think, over 10 books now. I have another one coming out later on this year. The Heidi St. John podcast coming up on 27 million downloads this year. That airs 3 days a week. People can watch me there. I love to meet listeners at the intersection of faith and culture. And to me, education is a key component to culture, which is why I talk about it so often. So, and I have a Bible study for women. It's called Faith That Speaks. I'm taking women through the Bible chronologically this year. I teach on Mondays over there and just learning, what it is that's new that God would have us learn this year. Through His Word, I've written over 50 Bible studies, and we drop a new one there every couple of months to augment what they're doing. But it's just my passion to really meet people at the intersection of faith and culture. I think that's where the Lord is doing His work right now.
So obviously all of that you just said still debunks the narrative that moms can't do anything else, like they can't work and homeschool their children. You are incredibly accomplished. But also I don't want people to think that they have to do something at the same time. It is okay to just be mom and just homeschool. Heidi, thank you so much for joining. You are a wealth of knowledge. I know my followers are going to love listening to this. And we'll have to have you back on soon for like a part 2. I know a lot of people ask high school specific questions even more, because that can be a little bit more tough, especially when there's things that, algebra, I don't remember. I'm like, okay, alphabet here, numbers here. I don't want them to go.
Oh, I know, me too. I know. Why do we have to mix them up? And that's just so crazy. I will say this though, on the high school front, homeschooling doesn't mean that you do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And so if you're at the jumping off place and you're looking at high school, I always tell moms, just do the next thing. Stop looking at this big giant thing in front of you, how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Just do the next thing. And even if you didn't teach your kid anything, your worst day homeschooling them and keeping them home out of that broken, woke, disgusting system that is the public school system be better than their best day in the public school. So you just got to keep your eye on the ball and know that what God started in you, He will finish.
You're so right. Heidi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.